Hi there, I care and you matter. I'm Shannon and welcome to my channel. And today I'm going to be reading the introduction from my book, Common Things, Core Truths. This book is a collection of 50 everyday objects that I've created into object lessons. In other words, when you see something from everyday life, you remember something or a way that you can actually improve your life in a practical way. This book was written because I desperately needed this. I needed a way to encourage myself and to empower and equip myself to not fix my life, but to make it better. And so today I'm going to read the introduction to you. If you're interested, this book is available on Amazon, link in the description below. So let's jump into it. Introduction. There's something inside, I said as I held up a tiny ring box. Do you think it's large or small? My class of 34 fourth graders had never been more vocal or divided. Half of them were certain of the answer, but the other half was certain it had to be a trick question. If a picture is worth 1,000 words, an object lesson is worth 10 times as much. That's because an object is something we can see, touch, use, and relate to. A good object lesson exploits this, associating an important or new bit of information, something that needs to stick, to something that's already familiar. And the most powerful and potentially impactful characteristic of an object lesson is that it continues to serve us. No need for sticky notes or posters on the wall. Every time we see, touch, or interact with the object, we're immediately reminded of the lesson or the truth it was tied to. Raise your hand if you think what's tucked inside is small, I continued, lifting the box in front of my face to emphasize its tiny size. I called on a few students to share their thoughts and reasoning aloud. Many of them were confident in the fact that the size of the outside container dictated the size of what could fit inside. Raise your hand if you think what's tucked inside is large. Not surprisingly, not one hand was raised. Are you sure? What if I told you what's inside could be 10 times larger than this box? Immediately I was met with laughs, shaking heads, and a few 9-year-olds contorting their eyebrows and mouths in ways and directions I'd never seen before, and I'd seen a lot. Who would like to open the box and find out? Again, not surprisingly, every hand in the classroom shot up, sometimes in pairs. I called on one of the students who opted to sit in the back. One of the students who felt he was always getting in trouble, and he wasn't wrong. He struggled a whole heck of a lot, and I knew it. He had pull-out services to help in the academic areas he had difficulty with, which were all of them, and he often came to class late. His mom struggled to get him and his many siblings ready and off to school on time each morning. And it wasn't uncommon for him to enter the classroom in a grumpy mood, aggressive, or even with cheeks stained white with tears. His skin was a deep chocolate brown, but I could see how his cheeks glowed red every time he got upset. This student and I had an understanding. I knew he hated being late all the time, and I knew this only added to his frustration. But he and I also knew he couldn't continue acting this way. It disrupted the class and only got him into even more trouble. So we made a secret pact. I'd allow him to sit in the back of the classroom so he could sneak in even when he was late without others noticing. But he had to agree to try to control his anger and frustration and pay attention while I was teaching, even while seated in the last row. This would have been a mighty big ask even for an adult, but I had his buy-in, so we tried it out. Things rarely go perfectly, though, and this agreement was no exception. I'll never forget one of the days he came into class like a tiny tornado. He slammed his backpack down on his desk. He huffed and puffed loudly, mumbling unintelligible words under his breath. About 15 minutes into the school day, I was up at the front taking attendance as the rest of the class worked on their multiplication flashcards. The paraeducator waiting in the back of the classroom motioned for my attention. With a bit of discreet pointing and hand gesturing, she asked if she should take him outside, but I shook my head no, indicating a just as discreet but adamant no. Instead, I handed the attendance sheet to another student to take to the office and asked the para if she would mind supervising the rest of the class while they finished their multiplication practice. That's when this boy and I stepped into the hallway for a quick chat. I motioned, inviting him to sit down at the student desk, which I kept right outside the classroom door. Then I pulled out one of the small student-sized chairs and took a seat myself. "Another bad morning, eh?" I said, clasping my hands together and dropping them in my lap. "Mine wasn't great either." "I dropped my flashcards. They went everywhere," he said. He'd obviously been crying because he was still out of breath, gasping between words. "My stepdad wouldn't let me pick them up. He stepped all over them and just kept yelling that we had to go." Suddenly at that moment, his anger melted into how he really felt. Sad. We both knew just how hard he'd worked to make those flashcards. He was also embarrassed because I'd bought the index cards for him. "Hey, that does sound like an awful morning. You win. Yours was worse." I crossed my arms in front of my chest. "But you and I both know we had a deal. You can't come into class throwing your backpack around and in a huff. But I'll tell you what you can do." "What? Go to the office?" This boy was all too well acquainted with going in to see the interventionist. It was a rough school, and to help with behavioral issues and challenges, there was a special staff member with a room next to the office where students could spend their time outside of the classroom to cool off and take a break. "Is that where you want to go? Do you think you need to?" I never wanted any of my students to see a trip to the interventionist as a punishment, though admittedly teachers used it as such. But can't we all, regardless of our age, benefit from timeouts? Heck, as the teacher, there were times I would have traded my entire afternoon planning period for a quick trip to the interventionist. But this student in particular hated it. "No," he said as he crossed his arms in front of his chest too. "Well, I'd like you to come inside. You have a lot of work to do making a new set of flashcards, but you can't do that until—" "But I can't. I'm all out of cards. I used them up." "I've got more. How about you work on them during Read Aloud after lunch?" As soon as I had him calm and before we returned to the class, I reminded him of an important truth that benefits us all to know. We can't control the actions or words of others, only ourselves. And no matter how upset we get, flying off the handle hurts us the most. It may help us blow off steam in the moment, but it only creates a bigger mess for us to deal with later. My heart ached for this kid. I knew he already felt unwanted enough. He didn't need more separation. He needed to feel, to know that he belonged somewhere and that he had value and worth. If my mom's new husband, my new stepdad, told me repeatedly through words and overt actions that I wasn't wanted, wasn't loved, and was only a chore, yeah, I'd be a big old bundle of nerves and anger too. And this boy's morning was just icing on that already crappy cake. I knew full well that his stepdad was probably beyond overwhelmed himself. Again, it was usually mom that had morning duty with the kids. But I also know that that man had no idea how much time and effort was poured into that stack of flashcards. Oh, I'm getting emotional. I remember this. My heart swelled with pride and simultaneously broke to witness firsthand just how much those cards meant to that little boy. I knew I wasn't supposed to have favorites, and because of this, I was especially intentional not to show it. But this particular student was my favorite, probably because he was open with me about his hurts, and now I chose him to open the tiny box. Feeling like he'd just been handed the biggest responsibility and opportunity ever, this boy stood up, pushed his chair in, which he never did, and walked slowly up to the front of the classroom. This kid milked it, and I was proud of him for it. He couldn't hide that grin that forced its way across his face. "Well, go ahead," I said. "Open it." Though this small-statured boy carried quite a heavy emotional load, he was quite a ham, too. I couldn't have picked a better student to up the intrigue and anticipation. As he opened the box a tiny bit and peeked inside, I watched every one of my students lean over their desks with bated breath. Come on, open it," another student yelled from across the room. The boy's cheeks gave way and his slight smirk immediately transformed into a wide-open smile. He turned the itty-bitty clamshell box so that the hinged side was facing the class, and only he could see what was inside. "Huh?" he said loudly, clearly disappointed. The once toothy grin fell from his face. What? What is it? I heard a few students shout. It's a balloon, the boy answered as he held up an ordinary deflated yellow balloon. What followed was, you guessed it, a powerful object lesson. A balloon can be small. It can be tiny if you squeeze out all the air and roll it up as tightly as I did. But a balloon can also be big. Its size depends entirely on how much air, how much you put into it. Life can be a lot like this too. If we try our best and put all of ourselves into something, the outcome will be much bigger and much better than if we don't. To drive that truth home, I blew that once tiny yellow balloon so darn big it was larger than my head, and way bigger than the box that once held it. Needless to say, I made my point, and that object lesson was a success. Admittedly, that little boy still struggled academically in many ways, even by the end of the year. But I hope that wherever he or anyone else in that class that day sees a balloon, they remember that they can do big, even huge things, if they're willing to give it their all. I've long since left the classroom. I've even raised 2 boys of my own. And I don't have any idea how life turned out for that once little boy, who is forever frozen in time in my memory. But I'll never forget the incredible power of a good object lesson. Oh, I'm sorry. The book you're holding is simple, and that's an asset, because often the most effective things are. Inside, you'll find 50 everyday objects, simple things you'll likely see and use daily, along with life-changing, life-improving truths tied to them. Life's hard. I don't think help should be. And I hope that these object lessons find their way into the corners of your memory, only to be awakened and brought to the surface every time you encounter one of these everyday things. Simple changes can often make our lives better in so many ways. The actions themselves are rarely difficult. The challenge lies in remembering to do them. That's where and how the object lessons that follow can help. Each unassuming, commonplace item can become a visual cue to help trigger the change, the action, to improve your everyday life in practical and impactful ways. Now, let's get on to the good stuff, the lessons themselves. May these object lessons help you bounce back, stress less, and feel better. Or, to put it even more simply, may they help you improve your now, no matter what that is. That is the introduction to this book. And the rest of the book is just filled with short, like I said, commonplace things. For example, clocks, laundry baskets, cup of tea, push pins. And it took me years to realize what I was doing. I needed to find a way to help myself, and I was feeling very alienated and alone. I was a classroom teacher. You know that. And when we adopted our son, who we did not know had special needs, my husband and I realized there was no way I could return to the classroom, which meant I not only had to stay home, I had to find a way to work from home and make money to help contribute to the household budget. But it also really, really alienated me. And I needed to find a way to help myself. And so I really leaned on my experience as a teacher and object lessons. There weren't a lot of people around me, but I was constantly doing chores and such around the house and looking for little ways. I mean, when you are so overwhelmed and so stressed out, it's the little things that add up that matter. Little things are much more accessible and doable, but their impact can their impact can just be incredible. So yeah, if you're interested, link to this book below, or let me know, and I'd be happy to read a few of these object lessons in future videos. If you've watched this far, thank you so much, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your week, and I will catch you in the next video. Bye-bye.